Hello, this is Jordan Brown going over Project 1. So for this project, the only requirements are to build a solid character controller using keyboard and mouse input. The character should be affected by gravity, and you should be able to physically interact with the world, and the scene contains geometry that lets you test the character's behavior, as well as having a unique mechanic such as sprinting or dodging or something like that. So if I go ahead and test it, as you can see, I built a third-person shooter style camera. The dot is a temporary fix to basically show where the crosshair will go in the future when I build a GUI. But for now, there is just a dot that's projected out where the camera's aiming. But as you can see, the character uses a root motion movement style. You can sprint as well. So this is regular running, this is sprinting. You can also jump. The jumping is slightly incomplete as well. There's a few collision bugs, things like this. But you're not allowed to double jump. If I spam the spacebar here, you'll only jump when you're on the ground. It does a raycast for that. As well, you are able to interact with objects, collide with things, push the ball around, the ball will fall off, as well as climbing up the ramp, falling off, things like that. Everything works properly. And as well, if I go over to my animation controller here, and I will put this side by side real quick, you can see right here as I move my character around, it moves the values on this blend tree, which contain the various animations for the character. And if I sprint, you can see that the limit goes from 0.65 to the full 1 and -1, which is how the sprint works. It basically just expands the available speeds so that you can get to these furthest edge animations on the blend tree. There's quite a lot of animations in here. One thing that I did as well is a little sort of smoothing system so that when you stop pressing a key, it slowly slides back down to 0 rather than just instantly stopping. I thought that would be a little bit nicer so that you can sort of transition out of animations a little bit better. Okay, now look at the code. So, for the character controller, actually let's start with the pawn. So for the pawn's code, it really doesn't have anything right now because all it is a model with the animations. So all it has is a move function that takes a vector 3 and then sets the floats in the animator for horizontal and vertical movement. So for the player controller has a reference to the pawn, so whatever pawn you want to control, you're going to be able to control. As well, you have a camera reference, and the reason for that is because the player controller is going to also control the camera movement with the mouse. As well, we have some public variables. The jump power is the only one right now, so that you can actually adjust how high you want to jump. And then these variables right here, the X move and Z move, are actually so that you can have that nice animation slowing down effect. Basically, how it works is these are constantly slowing down, but if you are pressing, if you are using the axis, either horizontal or vertical, it'll add to them. And that is a much faster effect, so you won't see the slowing down until you let go of a key. And then, if you're holding shift, it changes the maximum speed. So basically, the speed's going to be set to this walk speed 0.65, unless you're holding shift, in which case it's going to go to the sprint speed, which is 10. Then it clamps it to make sure that it can't go past essentially your fastest speed, whether it's sprint or walk speed. And then it moves the pawn. It actually moves the speed divided by 10, because the horizontal and vertical values within the pawn are between -1 and 1, where these ones are between -10 and +10. Then this is to do the camera right here. Basically, the way it works is... oh, sorry, this doesn't control the camera. This controls the rotation of the pawn. So this just basically sets the pawn's Y rotation to the Y rotation of the camera, the direction the camera's facing. So that way when you move left and right, the character will follow that. As well, the input keep space. This is for the jump. You basically just, if you hit space, it raycasts downward. And if there's something there, then it'll allow you to jump by setting the velocity of your rigid body. And lastly, we have the camera controller. The camera controller basically just has a few variables. You could basically attach this to any object, and that object would be able to control the camera. So basically, it has a subject, which is the thing the camera is going to focus on. It has a reference to the camera itself, As well, currently there's a temporary dot game object, which it's going to project out in front of the camera. Then for the public variables, you actually have a camera sensitivity, you have camera height, camera distance, and camera horizontal offset. See, these are all basically like the distance is how far away from the subject is the camera going to be. The height is how high above the subject is the camera going to be. And the horizontal offset is how far to the right or left is the camera going to be. So one thing I do is I always make sure that the cursor is invisible, because the way it's going to work is I'm going to have a crosshair there instead, and I don't want the mouse to be constantly moving around on screen. Then I set the variables yaw and pitch based on the axis of the mouse X and Y multiplied by the sensitivity variable. Then I make sure that the camera doesn't go upside down just by clamping it. I move the camera, and then I actually do a raycast here backwards to see if the camera hits anything. I didn't demonstrate this, but if I actually load up the game and go here to the game, if the camera actually hits an object, it'll push up against it instead of just going through it. That's one of the nice features I decided to program in, and that works at any distance. You can never get the camera in a place where you can't see. And that's essentially it. The only other thing is the placing the dot, which just projects a raycast forward and places the dot there, but that's temporary. Alright, that's it for Project 1. I apologize for getting it in so late.